tenuous is giving me a hard time on a lot of just the groundwork. I mean, I don't understand what's wrong with proposing definitions. I'm not saying accept them, just proposing it, and I was getting a really hard time. Just
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Like, we want to establish definitions so that we don't lose time on the debate. Like, oh, what do you mean by
yeah,
this? What do you mean by this? Yeah.
definitions and also axioms. Axioms that we both agree upon, and I'm not going to be, and he made it seem like I'm going to present axioms of what I want to prove, right? So let's just assume that free market is correct and go from there. Not at all. And also axioms.
Well, I mean, in my experience, like axioms and definitions are very tied in ideologically.
Oh, sorry. So let's just assume the free market is correct.
Oh, are you getting some echo there?
I had my YouTube on, and it turned on when I turned on the thing.
Okay, so we're live now.
We were live. Sorry, cool. We were live. We were live for a minute.
Okay.
Since you heard that, since you heard it come on, there's like that, and plus a delay, right?
Yeah. So I was just saying that, like, I mean, you guys were saying that axioms and definitions, we need to agree on that first.
Yeah. So
my perspective is more that, like, axioms and definitions are very tied in with your worldview and perspective and ideology, which is probably not going to change within the course of one discussion. So,
but this is common ground. So I don't understand I still don't understand the complaint. So I'm proposing axioms, general ones that we should agree, just like evolution exists, right?
Yeah, but like, why should we necessarily agree on that? Like, why is that not essentially part of the discussion? Because I feel like that there is discussion to be had there. It's not like immediately clear what the definition of things are, like the market or capitalism or whatever, or even socialism. I feel like your perspective on those things is tied in with your ideology, and that's not going to be resolved like right at the beginning. We can't just like wrap it up in a neat little bow before like moving on to the real discussion, because I feel like those things are a part of the discussion, and like they're probably not going to be resolved within one talk. But like I do feel like it's productive to articulate your definitions and axioms, and like so you see where each other stands. But I don't feel like that an agreement can necessarily be reached like at the beginning of a discussion.
No, but like sort of like disambiguating terms, though. So like so then we don't equivocate, and so then we don't strawman each other. Like you're just making clear what each party means by each word.
Yeah, especially with terms like subjective and objective, which have many alternative uses and ambiguous definitions. I want to clarify I want to stick to one set of definitions, so that no one can start to flip-flop between alternative usages, and confusion starts to take hold.
But
you can also like deviate though. But like if you deviate, you just make it clear that you mean something else.
Yeah, and no, I'm not opposed to that either, right? But there should be a primary usage. Like if there is no distinction made afterwards or beforehand of when an argument's made, that you're using the ones that's laid out prior to the debate. As far as subjective and objective is concerned, the dictionary.com definition is not consistent, right? I can show that one's a subset of the other, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, just using set theory. So you can't use these definitions because one says they're as opposed to, which is somewhat ambiguous, which I think means mutually exclusive, and they're not. I mean, I think subjective is a subset of objective, the way people want to try to mean it. I mean, they use it in a lot of different ways, but I'm having problems with that because I'm not an advocate of subjective value or subjective morality, right? I mean, I think one necessarily follows from the other. Once you endorse subjective value, you get the philosophical term of moral relativism. So I think egotism says. So one of the things I kind of wanted to. This is one of the more contentious things, axioms, that I wanted to agree. I can concede that this should be up for debate. But things like evolution exist, and if I define evolution here, and you shouldn't have any problem with, as far as the definition is concerned, I don't think any party should have any problem with the definition as long as it's, number one, consistent, and number two, well defined, right? So as long as it meets these two conditions. And also there's a third condition. There's no other alternative definition set that better helps explain reality, or is a more effective language, in other words, right? So if it meets these three criteria, if it's the best alternative, the most well-defined, I should say the most well-defined, and the most, what was the first one? I forgot what the first one was.
I mean, just ask him, like, that you were having trouble sort of figuring out in what senses he meant, for example, subjective, and in the other debate. So like just ask him that, like.
I saw he knows he was flip-flopping. He even he distinguished when he was using subjective in a certain way and subjective in a, so Mike's aware of it, I'm sure. But I wanted to stick to my definition, which is it's not necessarily going to let me give me any advantage in the debate. What my intention is to clarify what we're talking about, especially what I'm talking about when I criticize subjective value. Because if there's any ulterior motive of Mises as far as explaining how prices arise, it's ad hoc intentions. That's kind of like irrelevant to the discussion of morality, right? So I'll admit here, I'm going to have to prove first evolution exists. I'm going to have to also prove that the universe is deterministic. And then from that, I'm going to deduce relative value, what I call the relative theory of value.
I think we can all agree that, like, I mean, I know that me and Tenuous are determinists as well. So, like, that is something that we can accept for the terms of the debate.
Yes.
And so, I don't know about you, Adam, if you're a determinist, but if that's something that we can all agree on.
I'm a compatibilist. Like, okay. Yeah, the universe is mechanical and everything is predictable and so on. You're gonna change the future, but there is a sense in which choice not meaning changing the future exists. But anyway, yeah, determinism, sure.
Okay, see, this is what not only the so I think currently we all have an intuitive sense of what determinism is. The problem is I actually worked on, just quickly, I've worked on a mathematical definition of determinism. Adam, have you seen it? Or not yet?
I mean, you showed me really quick, and you put it in terms of probability theory.
Yeah.
That every event has a value between 0 and 1, whatever. Yeah, that just means everything is predictable, right? We agree on that.
Yeah, so, well, theoretically predict, not that we can actually predict it, but it's determined, right? To use a mathematical sense. And I'm using determined in a mathematical sense, right? It's not up to the subject's mind to determine it, to create the value, but it's determined already.
What if, like, instead of determinism, we have probabilism? Because I don't really take a position on whether we have determinism or probabilism. So basically, like, I don't really know. I'm not super familiar with quantum mechanics, but as far as I understand it, it's saying that on the deepest level of reality, basically, it is a matter of probability. And I mean, maybe there is like a deeper level of explanation about what causes those probabilities.
Yeah.
But I guess as far as we know, like in terms of physical theory, like it is just probabilities at the bottom of things. And like I would say that that's in a way like a kind of determinism, because the probability is determined at least, and it's not like that like there's any kind of free agent or something that's like kind of magically changing the direction of things. So I would say that whether it's probabilism or determinism is in effect doesn't really matter that much in terms of like the debate over free will or anything.
I'd have to think about that, but that doesn't sound consistent. That just off the bat, I have like an intuitive feeling that saying things are ultimately random, but the randomness is determined.
So like the thing with
you're half pregnant.
It sounds like Deepak Chopra, like the quantum mechanics thing with the slit experiment, that scientists cannot figure out when it's going to end up in which place.
Yeah,
people like to point that out as a debunking of determinism.
Yeah,
it's also conceivable, and there's no reason not to believe that. We just don't have the tools to measure that.
Yeah, so it's a function of our ignorance.
Just because we're not smart enough or don't have the tools to determine that doesn't mean it's not mechanistic and it can be determined. Yeah.
Well, but it still could be mechanistic and probabilistic.
I don't.
No, but how How can that be possible though?
Yeah.
Like we can make mistakes in the determination of something. It doesn't mean it hasn't been determined, right? Like the probability of anything happening is 100%, right?
Yeah, what does it mean? What does it mean to say that the probability that the coin will flip up heads is 100%, 50%? Right?
I guess all I'm saying is like our intuitions are based on a macro level world, right? We like quantum weirdness is not something we have intuitions about. So like any kind of intuition we may have about like, well, there must be some further cause that makes this really determined. That doesn't really apply on that level. So like as far as I'm concerned, it could very well just be probability at the bottom of things. Like I don't really know. But
Well,
that seems
so the thing is, you can't say either way, right? So in this case, axioms they have a certain element of induction fallacy in them, right? Because you can't prove you can't. The axioms are needed because at some fundamental level you can't have perfect knowledge. So you need some type. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way human knowledge is. You're gonna need some induction. So I don't believe in induction, right? I don't believe logic has any component of induction in it. Even mathematical induction is truly deduction. I make this claim. It's really deductive reasoning, not induction. But induction is going beyond, is like extrapolation, going beyond your data set. Now the thing is, we have to look at when we construct axioms. Unfortunately, the only thing we have here, because we don't have logical proof or mathematical proof, is we only have empiricism here at this point. Empiricism and extrapolation. And in all cases, the more knowledge we attain, we see probability always converges to either 0 or 1 for a well-defined event, even in a well-defined hypothetical, like in my definition. So I think it's safe to say assume, right? All the evidence seems to point that way. I mean,
so you're saying then that quantum mechanics, those problems are not well-defined because the probability isn't 0 or 1?
not the problems that aren't well defined, but it's a function of ignorance rather than what's objective reality.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that comes down to like the different interpretations of quantum mechanics, because people like Einstein like had that whole idea of like God doesn't play dice with the universe or whatever, like that was his intuition that there must be some deeper level at work. But a lot of the founding fathers, I guess you could say, at quantum mechanics didn't have that interpretation. I guess they used the quantum or the Copenhagen interpretation, which was basically that it's just basically probabilities and there's no like deeper thing at work. So I mean that is just one interpretation, but I mean I guess I don't know enough about quantum mechanics to say which interpretation is correct, but all I can say is that the Copenhagen interpretation seems as likely as not to me.
That doesn't help when you're constructing an axiom to build off. So we can either place 50-50 probabilities on it and create an expected value, or we can assume one that at least when you create the axiom of 0 and 1 for anything that's well defined, at least it has the tiebreaker of intuition.
But see, the thing is, like, it doesn't really matter at some point because all the quantum probabilities, they cancel out once you get that's why like even on a quantum level things can just like electrons can just randomly appear anywhere, but like on a macro level that doesn't happen because the probabilities cancel out. So like even if on a more micro level things are deterministic, and maybe on an even more micro level the probability is determined in some way that we don't know, but on the level of basic macro physics, like things are determined. So I would say that that's all that really matters for the things I'm interested in talking about, like society and politics and stuff like that. Like for me, quantum mechanics is not really super relevant, and I don't really have to go down to the deepest level to like say interesting or relevant things about society or politics, because like on some level it cancels out, and I don't have to worry about just things randomly popping in and out of existence like they do in quantum mechanics.
So I don't understand that last one. Are you agreeing with me then? That on a macro sense, that as far as human behavior is concerned, that we can safely assume 0 and 1 for
yeah, I would say so.
So at least you would tentatively agree. And if you now I'm allowing you to tentatively agree just so we can proceed with the debate. And then if we come across a critical problem where you see it's actually useful in arguing your case, not just emotionally but reasonably, right?
Yeah.
I'll allow you to take it back and then present why you want to take back that
Yeah,
axiom.
I mean, I would say that as far as the macro, I mean, even like physics is a very like micro level relative to human affairs, you know, and like, but it's like as far
It's
as
a
we're
good
concerned,
analogy, right? You were saying, right? To quantum mechanics, human action.
no, I mean, I would say that uh, basically all of human behavior is determined in some sense, and like our estimates of probability are like a function of not knowing all the variables. Like,
It's truly subjective, right? Subjective
uh,
probability.
well, yeah, I mean, it's a subjective probability because we don't know all the variables, and like, um, yeah, but the thing is, I don't know if we ever could know all the variables because the complexity of like um, using basic Newtonian physics to like derive what the stock market is going to do, like I think that it's
I don't
too
think
distant of a thing, you know?
I don't think I don't think even string theorists can do that.
Yeah.
Let alone Newtonian. I think you can just take any you can pick any random stockbroker and they'll probably outperform a string theorist in the stock market. You
Yeah.
might as well throw it. I mean, I don't see the point though. That argument doesn't lend any credibility to either of our sides because just because it's a type of inverse error. Right? Just because it somewhat criticizes our methodology, your methodology is not better in that same respect. So I don't see how it's I think it's a safe assumption though. At least we can tentatively agree, right? Things are determined, right? 0, 1. It's not up. Whatever the person thinks of it, it's in one respect irrelevant to
Mhm.
what we're talking about when we talk about morality or what's quote unquote right, which I'm going to propose a very tentative definition of morality, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so again, everything of mine is very rough, but very rigorous, right? So I've had some mathematical training.
Mhm.
So I've seen like I know the importance of definition and axiom because it's the starting point of any logical deduction, right? It has
Yeah. I
you
mean, I guess I just have to like I just go about things in a different way. Like I'm more of a I guess Nietzschean in that I kind of reject systematic approaches. Like I don't like I feel like that's what Western philosophy has been trying to do since like Descartes is trying to derive morality, trying to derive epistemology, metaphysics, and basically in the end, it didn't really go anywhere because like right now, epistemologists, you know, they've rejected foundationalism for the most part, as far as I know. Like they're more
No,
like
that's not
coherentists
true.
and
Like if you go to any philosophy department, the professors are foundationalists, and philosophy undergrads are usually edgy, sort of continental philosopher type things.
right, right. But I guess I would say I'm more in the continental school, and that
Mm.
I don't believe in a systematic approach. I think that like on some level it'll break down into some kind of triviality or just almost saying nothing. And I feel like that's what neoclassical economics does is it derives all this stuff and at the end of the day it doesn't really have any content because it's not saying anything specific because it's trying to be too universal, trying to apply to all humans at all times and all societies. And like I just don't think that approach will necessarily lead to like interesting conclusions about society
Uh,
and politics.
I think you might be right for morality. So, like, if you look at Aristotle, the things he was saying about morality, people are basically saying now. But when you see like what Aristotle was saying about, say, for example, physics and chemistry, we have like moved way past that.
Yeah.
So progress can be made when it comes to knowledge.
yeah, you're being all
Moral knowledge is different. So
that's
I don't think it's correct to have like a
yeah,
non-systematic approach to everything.
it's overly cynical. Uh,
I
also,
mean,
I just want to say that I didn't mean to like ambush you, Mike, 2-on-1.
Yeah, no worries.
So, so when I get that. Okay, go ahead, Adam. Sorry, I didn't mean.
I know, and another thing though that Brian uses morality in a sense which I don't think you share. So for most people, and I think you probably agree with this, morality is sort of distinguishing between correct and wrong action, and wrong is more or less a feeling. Like it's almost about punishment more than anything. Like when can you like justify saying this is wrong enough to like warrant action, right? But when Brian says morality, he means how to determine what's the best course of action, assuming an ultimate end, and sort
Yes.
of like an ultimate general end. And I don't think that's the sense in which most people use morality.
That's
But if you want to understand Brian though, so like keep that in mind.
Right.
yeah. So I believe there's a primary objective imposed upon you by evolution, right? So once you give me the axiom of evolution that exists, and if we define evolution here as whatever natural mechanism that already exists that selects for whatever is in existence at any point in time, especially concerning the future. If you agree with that definition, that general definition, which I don't see anything wrong with it, if that ultimately is morality, that's why we have a brain. That's why nature gave us the ability to
But
comprehend.
like, how do you define morality though, Brian? Because like, this is your problem.
I have to
And,
first define the primary objective, which is
no, but like just define morality in general, though, because this is like most people use it in a completely different sense than how you use it.
But their senses, their definitions are not rigorous enough for analysis.
No, they're not rigorous, but they're not what you mean though. So they're
They
gonna
are what they
understand.
mean. Mine's more defined, right? Theirs is just what's right and wrong, and then it's poorly defined from there. It's it's ambiguous from there, right? What's right and
It's
wrong.
poorly defined, but they don't know what you mean though. So just explain that.
Oh yeah, okay. So I agree that morality is just right and wrong, but right and wrong don't make any sense without an objective, right? You can't talk about what's right and wrong without giving the problem you're trying to solve first.
Yeah. Okay. So for most people, morality is sort of prescriptions that don't have an if, more or less, sort of like things that are inherently wrong.
Yeah, it's like what
There
Kant would
is
call
there's
like a categorical
No.
imperative versus like a conditional imperative. So like
Yes.
it seems
yes.
like
So
what
Brian
Brian is
makes the
saying
claim
is
that
like morality is like a conditional imperative. Like if you want this, then do that. But I think the general way that most people conceive of morality is a what did I say again? Categorical imperative. Basically,
yes.
do this. There's no if, and, or buts.
Yes. So Brian makes the claim that that doesn't exist. That there can only be prescriptive statements based on reality
Yeah.
and sort of like defined goals.
Yeah, and I think I would also disagree. I mean I do believe in conditional imperatives, but I don't think that the goal is necessarily predefined for us. I guess I'm more of an existentialist in that I think that we can
Yeah.
define
Okay.
our
So
goals in different
that's a
ways.
good objection, and I used to have that. But then what Brian's gonna say then? So like, say for example, with someone says murder is wrong, right? And then you ask them, okay, but what happens if you murder? And you might say, oh, you get punished by society. But then you
Mhm.
might ask, okay, but what if there is no one to punish you for that? Then the other person sort of like moral intuition sort of like falls apart, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like a statement, don't do that. But then what if you ask that to Brian? He's gonna say evolution or just nature is gonna force you to take the correct course of action because otherwise you're gonna go extinct. And this sort of gets more into like the content of his moral ideas. But basically, he says you should do everything so that your genes and your ideas go as far as possible, even beyond your physical body, right? So if it sounds weird, it is very weird.
Yeah, I mean,
But he does have an answer for that question, though.
okay. I mean, I
Which
I don't really agree with evolution determining our ends. Like I think that even if, let's say, I decide to not have children or not propagate my genes at all, I still think that like morality applies, or like
yeah, so
that
he
I
would
can
say that's
define moral
immoral.
goals and so forth. Or I mean, I guess I'm more of a subjectivist when it comes to morality.
Yeah. So
But
the thing about it, it doesn't matter what you choose as your primary or secondary, tertiary goals, right? It doesn't. Nature doesn't care. It's always going to be arbitrating what you do. I really discount the subjective value, right? And okay, let me just. I think at this point, I think I need to give my proposals of definitions for subjective and objective. So, in order to come up with something that's I wanted it to be, so I'm going to define subjective as. Oh God, I'm starting to think. Subjective is anything created by the mind, as far as the values that's determined mathematically by the mind, right? Not measured, right? But your mind actually creates the actual value when you're considering it or you're trying to measure it. And the only things that fit this definition in reality is opinion itself, right? So the only thing that's subjective is opinion itself. Okay. So that's subjective. Anything 100% created by the intelligence of the mind, right? Now, it gets very hairy here because you're gonna have to. I have to differentiate I have to define the mind and where it begins and ends. And I say it begins at the point of processing raw perceptual data, the intelligence part. When it's handed the raw data of the perceptions, that's the mind. That's what I call the mind. Any processing that occurs after, because obviously you cannot control your perceptions. At least your mind cannot. And when we're talking about the act, we're usually referring to his mind. And this is my concern here. So when I say subjective, it has to be totally created by, and that's only your opinion, right? And in some ways it's determined, right? But and so when you define it this way, and I define objective as anything that's an object in reality, anything that exists essentially. And so when you define it this way, it shows that any subjective object is a subset of objective. Now in order to clearly make sense of the world, I have another category that's the complement of subjective, non-subjective. I just call it non-subjective, and this is what people like to refer to as objective in normal English, right? But now you'll see the complement is anything not created by the mind 100%, right? So if there's any element that an intelligence didn't create or determine, right? So, and this is what I talk about when I talk about true value, because most values are non-subjective, right? So when you talk about utility, which is ambiguous, and this is the problem. This is the problem of I'm sure we're going to discuss when we get to the substitution effect, like you're going to refer probably to the substitution effect and how it somewhat proves the law of supply and demand wrong. And ultimately, there's a stronger law you can create that accounts for this when you clearly define utility in terms of my primary objective, which nature always adjudicates. So my tiebreaker, as far as versus any other subjective objective, any other subjective goal that anyone were to take versus my goal that I propose that nature imposes upon you, I'll always have the tiebreaker that evolution always selects for my objective, because I've defined it as evolution. I'm always going to win the argument because you're going to go extinct, right? I mean, I don't see how I trivially win just that argument, right?
Yeah, so ultimately his moral system is an appeal to, it's a form of consequentialism, which appeals to the consequences of you going extinct, which means, not furthering your genes and your ideas as further into, like, the evolutionary future of man goes, or whatever.
Now
I don't know if this is relevant, by the way.
Now, when the actor acts, right? Now the question is, what do you want to maximize, right? So when you're set out to fulfill a goal, right? You can segment the process into sub goals, and this is where conflation starts to happen. Sometimes people lose sight of the primary objective, and then they start to call like a sub-objective primary, and they start to lose focus of, they start to lose focus that it's only a means toward a greater end, and that's the thing. Is there a primary objective here? And if there is, you can further define the law of supply and demand in terms of a utility that addresses this primary objective. And if you do that, I propose that it solves all the inconsistencies that you think there are of neoclassical economics. And
I don't think that I mean I guess my feeling towards instrumentalism is that in some ways that devalues life. Like I think that it's like working towards a goal just for that goal. Like that goal is never going to be satisfactory. Like in a sense it's just there for you to work towards it, in other words. So like if I have set the goal of like writing a song, let's say, and I want to complete that song, like the actual completion of the song is not the point, because like if I were to come up with some way to instantaneously create a song, then that would not be enjoyable because there would be no process of creating the song, right?
Then that wasn't your objective in the first place. If it's not really the point, if you're claiming that you haven't satisfied the goal when you reach it, you didn't really clearly define your objective there. If that's the case. Now
yeah, I mean, I guess you could say include the process as part of the goal, but that becomes like really.
You didn't state that beforehand. You stated the goal was just to create the song.
Right.
Fulfilled that once you reach that point. So, by definition, you've satisfied that goal. Now you can what's that? It's not intellectually honest to say that you didn't fulfill that goal. By definition, you have fulfilled that goal.
But is fulfilling the goal, is that the point? Like, I mean, maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is right? Going towards the goal.
But you didn't state that beforehand, right? So it must be one of these two cases. Either you stated the goal correctly, and you're mistaken you're mistaken in the fact that there's another goal. And so here's a problem here that I always see, right? You cannot have. It's very difficult to have more than one primary objective, right? That means so the primary objectives are totally independent of each other, and they must not be sacrificed for any other objective. I'm making this up as I go because I didn't formulate this, but just from my intuition. So this is really tentative here. Okay, so you understand that, right? So, for instance, if you have if you claim two objectives are primary, and I can construct a hypothetical where you have to choose one or the other, and you choose one, that proves the other one wasn't primary in the first place. Okay, so it cannot be sacrificed. So a primary objective, by definition, cannot be sacrificed for any other goal, right? So if your goal is to make money and not save lives, right? I can construct so maximize lives and make money, right? I can construct a hypothetical where it puts those at odds. Just like I have problems with utilitarianism, right? Because when you look at just the intuitive definition of utilitarianism, which is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? You see two primary objectives put forth there, and it's so what that does, it becomes inconsistent, right? I can create a hypothetical where there are more people that you save, but the greater good is with the lesser person, saving the lesser person, the lower quantity people, right?
Yeah.
So and there's a problem here. What does I claim utilitarianism is ambiguous. It's poorly defined, right? I can create good definition, a well-defined morality, a well-defined definition works exactly like a function. So in moralities, in the context of morality, a good, well-defined morality will take a situation, take a well-defined action in a well-defined hypothetical, real or not, past, present, purely hypothetical or not, or real. It'll take that well-defined hypothetical and action and classify it as either right or wrong, right? This is what a well-defined morality must do. And in order to do this, I claim, and this is tentative, I'm not sure if it has to be a unique primary objective. I'm leaning that way. I want to lean that way because it makes the analysis much more simpler, obviously. Right? The more primary objectives it probably becomes exponentially harder to analyze. But so there's that problem here, right? Like I say, if you even increase it to 2, to anything other than one primary objective, now it becomes a burden for the person trying to disprove how consistent that morality is by constructing a hypothetical. So anytime you give me more than one primary objective, I'm gonna try to construct a hypothetical counterexample to disprove the consistency of your morality by showing that you must choose one or the other. Okay, so
I can see that, but I think that like on a basic level, there are like different things that are good. Like let's say freedom and equality. I mean, I know libertarians don't really care much for equality, but like that is something that a lot of people value, and I think that on some level, those things are both valuable, and like it becomes really, really hard to find some third thing with which to make them commensurable and basically turn them into just one objective. Like I think on some level that kind of analysis will break down, because like I just think that there's more than one thing that's good, and sometimes there's just not a way to decide between them. It's like a kind of indecidability, and I think this kind of like undecidability or ambiguity is kind of just part of the human condition.
I don't think it necessarily is. Okay, so first of all, just in your example, when you talk about freedom and equality, first off, I think equality is somewhat well defined, at least well defined enough to continue with analysis. Freedom, that is not well defined. You mean from government, from other people's coercion, from nature's laws? Because we're always constricted by our abilities, right? Yeah. I don't understand when you mean freedom and equality. I don't want to get too far into like specifics in a debate, but I just want to like see like your argumentation. What do you mean by freedom?
I mean, freedom. Yeah, for me. I don't have like a rigorous mathematical definition or something, but I just know that like if I were put into solitary confinement, I would not be free. And
okay, so
I don't know how I would describe like why I'm not free. I mean, maybe it's just lack of options, like lack of I guess reasonable options.
Yeah. So when I get into debate about free will, I like to talk about so it's levels of ability that you're concerned here, but the particular concern is what's limiting your ability, if there's any limit at all, right? So obviously omnipotence is impossible, right? So we're going to assume omnipotence is impossible because of the omnipotence paradox, which is proof by contradiction, so it's impossible. So therefore, everyone's restricted in some way, whether it be by natural ability or other actors.
Yeah.
And I think this is what you're concerned with, other actors. Now, libertarians are concerned primarily with being constrained by a monopoly of aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that's your primary concern or if it's concerned by general coercion of other actors, which doesn't necessarily mean they're government, right? It can be like just me putting a gun to your head, and that takes away your freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the basic concern is the lack of options, and I think that there could be various situations which lead to that situation. Like it could be government coercing you, or it could be a criminal putting a gun to your head, or it could be like just economic destitution where you are forced to, let's say, work at Walmart even though you really would rather not. So basically I think that coercion and freedom are I think that positive and negative freedom are not linked in that way, in that sense of
there's a general coercion there.
Whether you're forced by your circumstances or by other people,
yes,
in some sense doesn't matter, because like you're still
if it's passive aggression. But the thing is, I think that's where the term aggression comes in handy here to differentiate the two types of coercion you're talking about, right? When one actively aggresses and one passively aggressives, like me not giving you an employment position when you're destitute, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of like coercion you're referring to, when it's kind of like the other type of coercion. It seems like you're trying to differentiate between two, and I think aggression is relevant here at this point. Aggressive, coercive by another actor. And then my only problem with coercion is the type of coercion that's done by a monopoly, right? I'm not opposed to aggression in when it's done without a monopoly.
Hmm.
I think you're more of a you're taking a more humanitarian perspective,
Right.
and you see me, you kind of idealistically want to remove all types of coercion. That means you want to remove even the bounds of scarcity. I mean, yeah, the constraints of scarcity and the need for economics, which
Right.
is a nice goal to have, but it's setting it as a primary objective
Yeah, I mean,
goes
it,
against nature itself, I think.
yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'm still kind of in progress of working out. Like I think that on some level, some kind of scarcity and some kind of like lack of options is part of the human condition, and like I just think that um, part of the quality of our experience is having options, and like it's not that that's the primary goal to like maximize options, because that can be paralyzing too. Like if you have a million possible things you could do, like then you have a hard time choosing, right? So like, I mean, in some sense, there's not anything wrong with having um, like a certain set of options. I just think that like when your options are restricted and that those
Artificial.
options are not in some sense desirable, I think that's what we kind of want to avoid.
Okay, so I think the disagreement here is going to be, I don't think there's nothing necessarily wrong with non-monopoly aggressive coercion, and your problem is coercion in general.
What do you mean by non-monopoly coercion?
Government.
So,
Government coercion, that's it.
so government coercion is the only coercion that counts?
Monopoly coercion, yes.
What about like a criminal acting outside of the government that's like putting a gun to your head?
Um, egotism claims you cannot make moral evaluations from any other perspective than the actors. So you would have to give me the conditions under
I mean,
which.
just really quickly, he doesn't mean like Stirnerian egoism. He uses egoism in his own sense as well. So he doesn't like constrain yourself to your physical body, right? So he considers things close to you part of your. He calls it the meta self or whatever. But anyway, he can explain that better.
Oh, I hope I can.
Mhm.
Okay, so I claim that an actor should be concerned with his meta self, and the meta self is actually a conceptual set. Right? I claim that people like to think that concepts don't exist, and I claim just the opposite. All concepts as a concept exist by default. Right? They're not created by the mind. They're not subjectively determined.
Mhm.
They are discovered. Right? Just like mathematics. Here's one here's one intuitive sense to see what I'm talking about. It doesn't make any sense to say that we create the concept of quantity, any quantity you can think of, which numbers are a term for, right? They reference quantity. It doesn't make sense that someone's created the quantity of a Google plus one or a Google
Right.
plus two. It doesn't make any sense to say that there's the largest quantity that's ever been considered and therefore created, right? So then, therefore, it must be that they exist by default, right? They're discovered, not created, and this goes for any concept, because concepts themselves are ultimately quantitative.
Mhm.
And so this is where I'm gonna need mathematics, and if my philosophy ever takes hold, I'm gonna actually have to rigorously show this. Like you can map any concept, any well-defined concept, you can map to the real number system.
Mhm.
So it's somewhat not only real number system, probably the natural numbers.
Mhm.
and like countably infinite, right? So that means just so if another way to look at it is like with definition, right? Let's just take colors and hardness, right? You can create any combinatorial from these two depending on how large the sets are, right? The set size times set size.
Mhm.
Red, soft, right? Blue, soft. Yellow, soft. Red, medium. Red, blue, medium. Yellow, medium, right? It doesn't make sense that you created these things because every combination is like kind of already there, and you're just considering it. You just happen to consider you've discovered it, in other words. So
Yeah,
that's what.
I think that makes sense. Like you could think of a kind of like hyperdimensional conceptual space that includes all the possible
Yes.
dimensions that
Yes.
that a concept could possibly have,
Yeah.
and then every concept is just some particular point on that hyperdimensional space.
Yes, but this dimension is within the universe itself. I don't want to say it's outside of the reality. It's part of reality. It doesn't.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
doesn't.
it's a kind of like I mean, I'm not really sure what I think in terms of like philosophy of mathematics or something, but it does seem like that there is maybe some kind of, I guess, realm of ideas or something that
Yeah.
already
No,
exists.
he's not a Platonist though.
Yeah, I actually, that's why I actually think Plato's forms refer to this.
Hmm.
No, I think
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you're right.
Plato's forms are referring to concepts themselves. But
No,
what his problem is he's kind of conflating the idea of a superset, right?
Hmm.
A more general definition, when each element has further definition than the superset it's an element of, right? Just because I am a human, that's true, but I have further definition, and he conflates this more perfect form, this more general form of just the general definition of a human, right? What qualifies me as a human, that general definition that's missing more added descriptors to make me who my meta self is, that kind of different not differentiates but distinguishes me from any other element in the set.
Hmm.
He was talking about the superset of human.
well, I mean that's like a controversial interpretation of Plato.
But
Like he,
you can arbitrarily talk about the Platonic form. I can further like restrict the Platonic form to me, to my meta self. It's funny thing with definition, just like with monopoly, right? You can create a monopoly based on how specifically you define an industry, right? It's a funny little trick it's a funny little logical mechanism that happens there. Once your consideration changes focus. So these Platonic forms, he's just confused because he doesn't know what he's. I don't want to say I'm smarter than Plato, but I don't think I'm not sure he's had like he's considered the set theory, just the basic set theory. But conceptual sets help to explain what he wants to mean by Platonic forms. If that makes any sense, I'm not
I
even
mean,
sure.
that kind of makes sense to me. I mean, I'm not an expert on Plato or anything, but
Me neither.
um,
I hate philosophy, Adam.
yeah, no, it's. I mean, we all know what you mean. Just avoid calling it Platonism, just
yeah.
to avoid ambiguity.
Oh, okay. What's Plaid? What were you referring to when you were talking about Plaid?
I mean, it's yeah. So like,
Platonism.
he doesn't say that all ideas exist, but rather he says everything is ideas, and then to the extent that ideas exist in the physical world, is to the extent that they are imperfect. So like you can think of
Yeah,
a rabbit.
that part. I was agreeing with that part.
So like for Plato, a rabbit is a deviation from the perfect rabbit, which exists somewhere
Yeah.
in
So
the
what he's
Platonic
saying,
realm.
he's saying an instance of a rabbit contains more definition than the superset of rabbit.
I mean, again, like this is just your interpretation of sort of like hearsay.
I think it's accurate though. Think
No,
about.
I know. No,
Isn't that
yeah,
true?
but like what I'm saying, that just for the sake of disambiguating and making things clear,
It's
just don't say
counterintuitive.
Platonism.
It's like calling entropy order, right? Disorder. It's a calling entropy disorder when it's a type of equilibrium state, right? It's somewhat just because there's English is so messy that it has connotative meanings that you somehow you can't detach yourself of, and you can't help but get a bad this is a bad interpretation. So when you call it imperfect, it's doing an injustice to elements of a set, right? Because elements of a set always have more, at least have more, they're greater than or equal to the amount of descriptors as a superset, right? You would agree there.
I think I would like kind of interject here, and I think that on some level my definition of objective and subjective is kind of different here, and I think that like on some level there is no difference between subject and object. Like everything is object basically. Like everything's a thing that exists, but on the other hand, I think that people's minds, like even though they're part of a brain, right? I mean, like a mind only exists because of a brain, but
Yes.
like at the same time, like we experience this thing, and like that experience, whatever it is not contained in the object, the space of objects, and like that's not to say that it's magic or something like that, but it somehow exists. You can't see red, like the color red. You can't, if you just had an objective view, there's nowhere you could find red except as a pattern of neurons. Like, and that pattern of neurons would not be red. So I think that there does exist this kind of like space of subjectivity, of mind, or ideas or concepts or whatever. And like I don't know in what sense that exists, or like there's not a place you can say that exists, like it exists here or there, but it still exists in terms of like that's how we experience the world. And I think that like this conceptual space is like I think Brian is right that it like exists, and we discover it, and it's not just something we create. But I think that it's kind of two different things. Like maybe I'm kind of a dualist or something, but I think that the space of ideas and concepts is like in some sense different from the space of like object.
It's he got dropped off.
It's very spooky.
Yeah, but anyways,
I think he was well. I mean, it's unfair to say anything when he's not here. But okay, so
Sorry,
did you
my
mean
cat
something
jumped
to do with? Yeah, that was very scary. But do you mean something like the veil of perception, and that there's a difference between the quality of what you perceive as like in your mind when you see red and red itself? Is that what you were saying?
What are you referring to, the light or your perception of the light?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like the red as like defined as some kind of pattern of neurons is like a different kind of thing than
the perception of the light.
Perception of red, even though there may be like a one-to-one relationship between them.
You don't think that
they're different things.
So
yeah, but like the perception exists, right?
Yeah, I'm not a dualist, so yeah, I'm gonna make the same case that Adam seems like he's making right now.
Yeah, I guess I would say maybe I am a dualist. I just think that there's a one-to-one relationship between mind and body, or between subjective and objective.
Where do you think this perception occurs, if not in reality?
I don't think that it can be like geolocated anywhere.
It just reminds me, like I was listening to your one of your chats with Tenuous about subjective and objective morality. I think this was it. But I even had a chat with him, but he didn't. I thought he would mention like my perspective, because he was talking about circles and like how they didn't exist.
Uh-huh.
And I totally disagree, right? You look at the definition of circle, and they're everywhere in space, right? You just look at the definition. They're points relative to a fixed point that are equidistant, given a certain distance, right? On a plane, right? And for every point you can point to in any space, and you give me any radius, any proper distance, I can show. There's a circle. There's points relative to that fit this definition.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm sure he's talking about drawing a circle, right?
Yeah.
But it's silly to say that circles don't exist in reality. And same thing to say that perceptions are not somewhat much. Even if you don't want to just say it's like a part of the brain, the chemical reactions in the brain, you can say that those are the actual perceptions, because I can induce those perceptions with those same chemicals.
Right. But I think that because I think that the subjective like mind is just like in some sense what it's like to be the brain. So I think that there's a one-to-one relationship between them, but our experience and concepts and ideas and all this stuff, like even though they have a reflection in the objective pattern of neurons or whatever, I still think that they're, in some sense, they exist independently because, like, at least as far as human experience is concerned, like, there is such a thing as red, there are such things as circles, all these things, like, do exist, like, and, it's
like
part of the mind, and it's, like, the mind is the brain, but it's kind of not the brain also
it
because
sounds like it's
that's what it's
just
like to be a brain.
it sounds more like wishful thinking to make the human mind more special than it really is, right? You kind of want to differentiate it from any other things in reality, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the hidden, the unconscious objective. What you're trying to do, you want to make it seem that it's somewhat more special than anything else in reality. Isn't that your objective?
I mean,
Even if it might be subconscious, that you have to admit that it seems like that's what it is.
well, I mean, I'm not saying it's like inherently special. Like, I think, I mean, there's this philosopher who's like one of the top philosophers of mind or something, but he thinks that basically everything is conscious in some sense. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I think that, like, in some sense, like a brain is kind of special because it has these specific connections that somehow result in our experience, and like we know that experience exists because we live and we experience human reality, right? And
At
like
least
I don't know if that's sorry.
Yeah, so like
At least-
it seems like this is getting to the problem of consciousness and all that.
Yeah,
and
I'm
I
not
don't think
sure.
we just like solve it right now.
We can leave that.
Yeah.
We can leave that as up in the air.
Right. But I just wanted to say that, like, I mean, like, we don't really know if it's special because there could be any number of things that are conscious in some other way, but we do know that we are conscious, and like I just think that, like, that experience, whatever that is, and it includes ideas and thoughts and concepts, that is a thing that exists, that we know exists, and it's in some sense different from just the pattern of neurons, even though there's a one-to-one relationship.
Do you group other animals' perceptions in the same category?
Yeah, I would say that, like, cats, dogs, or pigs or whatever, they also have like a experience.
I don't mean to go too far off topic, but do you think animals have rights?
Yeah.
What are these rights?
I mean, I can't like completely define them, but I would say that like they have a right to not be like tortured to death, basically, or that would be one example.
But they can be eaten just as long as they're not tortured.
Well, I mean, we have certain obligations towards them. I mean, like, yeah, like a lion may like kill a gazelle, and that may be very painful. But like, in terms of our capability of choosing to act like morally or non-morally, we have an obligation to act in certain ways, even if like a lion may not be able to have any moral obligation.
Okay, so egotism will say this is a dominated strategy, right? To acknowledge other animals, or just to broadly define that all animals have certain rights. You have to take into account conditions, right? I mean, as far as being humane to animals that we you're not a vegetarian, are you, Mike?
No, I mean, I try to eat vegetarian just to like reduce my consumption of meat, but I'm not a vegetarian.
How do you reconcile that with what you just said?
Well, I would say that like basically animals don't have a right necessarily to not be killed, but that they should be treated humanely, basically.
Now, this poor definition of humane, right? One really humanitarian, one vegetarian might say even quickly slitting a cow's throat, or even beheading it really quickly, or I don't know what they do to relieve any torture or whatever. But they'll have a different definition of where does it begin and end? Where does the right amount of I don't know where you draw the line between killing and torture. It's ambiguous, arbitrary, subjective.
I think that there is like that level of subjectivity and ambiguity that's always inherent in morals, and like to me that's what makes morality interesting, because like I want, like, I don't think that those ambiguities can be easily resolved. I mean, I like to like think and talk about it, but I think that there's that ambiguity. It's just going to be there, and like I guess I just don't think that by deriving everything from the bottom up, you're necessarily going to be able to resolve that.
It's just constructing some moral rule, even if it is your personal subjective preference.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a dominated strategy. Like, I can construct a hypothetical where I'll force you to, you'll somehow, it feels practical to violate this moral ethic, which kind of proves it wasn't a moral ethic in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So I can construct, even if it might be a silly hypothetical, the fact that your moral ethic cannot deal with it, or cannot deal with it elegantly, it just shows the advantages mine has over yours, evolutionary wise.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, in some sense, philosophically, like, questions are more powerful than answers, and I think that, like, every time we try to construct an answer, it ends up being inadequate, and I just believe in continually returning to that question to, like, basically expand the possibilities, because I just think every time we try to construct this answer, it's always leaving something out.
But like, can't a question be wrong though? Like, can't a question have premises that are mistaken? Like when people ask, is there like, what's the meaning of life? The question presumes that there's such a thing as a meaning to life or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, what if you're just asking, incorrect questions?
Yeah.
But what do they mean by meaning?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a poorly defined question.
But see, if you return to the question, like, then what do you mean by meaning? Like, I think that there is something in that question that defies an attempt to answer it, and I think that, like, every time we try to delimit that and, like, okay, this is what life means, that doesn't stay true to the question, because I think on some level, if you return to the question, you kind of recognize that it's kind of like a existential feeling that's, like, trying to be it's kind of like demanding the universe provide an answer to a thing that, yeah, like you said, it's not well defined, but, like, that's not the point of that question, kind of, because it's like trying to find the value of life or something like that. And I think
if it's ambiguous, and I think the point is to confuse you.
Yeah, but I still think it's a valid question, because
I mean, could it be that the question is trying to express a feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
Okay, but, like, is it worth it to try to answer questions which are just like expressions of feelings?
And that because it's trying to express a feeling, that means that it cannot be answered, and, like, answering it doesn't acknowledge what that feeling is, or, like, doesn't really provide an answer, because the answer to that question would itself be another feeling.
Yeah,
not like an articulated rational.
So how is it valuable to, like, not answer questions or whatever? Like, I guess I don't see what you mean by that.
Rhetorical questions? Are you making?
Yeah, I mean, like, because, I mean, if you return to the question, then, yeah, like you said, it's you can transcend that question by, like, exploring different, like, feeling states where that question no longer seems relevant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
I didn't gather any meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what I mean by that either, but I guess I think that, like, when someone is asking what's the meaning of life or whatever, I don't think that, like, by explaining an argument that really answers the question. But if they were to experience life in a different way, then maybe they would not have the feeling that generates that question.
I think the approach is all wrong. Again, you must approach it from evolution's perspective. Number one, like, I don't care what. Like, ultimately, I really don't care anyone's subjective valuations, right? I care about the relative value of everything, of what unless I'm trying to determine what you're going to do so I can act accordingly, right? And then I'm concerned with what you actually think. Other than that, most of the time I'm really thinking of an objective value, or what I call relative, that's mathematically determined. Right? That's what I mean by relative.
I mean, I think that sums up kind of the differences between, like, maybe the way you think and maybe the way Einstein and tenuous theory.
Now the thing is there an advantage to one to the other universally that can be, if you were to apply this strategy and let someone choose it. Is it advantageous for everyone to adopt my strategy, my perspective of way of thinking, versus any other alternative to that? And I've already defined it in terms of evolution. I don't see how you can generally, just generally. I'm not opposed to revising some of the more specifics, the specifics, but generally, I've defined morality as whatever evolution is selecting for. I don't see how you can improve upon that as far as optimizing strategy, if you want to exist.
But see, the thing is
saying
people.
morality is whatever ends up winning.
Yes,
So
unfortunately.
if the Nazis
Yeah, see,
were
I
like
totally
to
can
dominate
like find
everything, then that would
definition.
be right, objectively right.
Say that again, Mike.
If the Nazis won World War II and like spread their ideology throughout the world, that would be
But
objectively right.
that's where ego-utilitarianism says that would only be a temporary thing, right? Ultimately, cooperation, because of comparative advantage, the law of comparative advantage shows why there's an inherent desire to cooperate with each other, right? There's no other law that shows why. The only instance where conflict becomes profitable is when it becomes a zero-sum game, right? So this requires a proof. Now the thing is, there's in the face of comparative advantage, the fact that abilities will always differ. It's impossible to find someone with exact abilities between two goods. It's impossible. It's the same thing as integrating from A to A, right? In a probability distribution. It's impossible. You'll never find. And on top of that, let's assume that two people were exactly the same in production as far as two goods. Just by specializing, you're going to get better at producing one good than the other once they differentiate and start to specialize, even though they're the same at the starting point. Just by specializing itself makes them more experts in their field of production. So the law of comparative advantage, it puts a great cost on aggression itself. It's not infinite. So this is where I say in certain rare, maybe even not so rare circumstances, it's correct to aggress. In rare circumstances, it's correct to murder. In some, and this is all done. This evaluation of when you should do these things should be done only from the actor's perspective. It makes no sense for me. Let's say I was considering murdering you. It makes no sense for me to view it from your perspective, to put myself in your shoes. Oh, if I were Mike Hugman, do I want to be murdered? No, it doesn't make any sense to do that, right? I have to weigh your value to me, and I have to weigh the consequences of killing you with respect to me and everything that supports my meta self, not actually me, not my physical body. I know it sounds somewhat cold, and I know Tenius is going to have problems with this, right? I know, because it's one of the most Spock-like things you could say, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where, I mean, at least I differ. I mean, I don't know where
you can differ,
Tenius is coming from, but I think that like I just don't agree with that kind of like
you can disagree.
That takes you out of yourself, because I think I believe in the fundamental value of the human experience, and like I think that our feelings towards each other, they're not just like toward like basically oriented towards self-interest. I think that those feelings are something that are of value, and I don't think that like that the value of that can be like rationally computed or something like that. But I still think that's something that's a value that I want to assert in terms of like
that's just an assumption, but egotism says that feelings are unnecessary, right? You can rationalize. Okay, so not only is there an advantage in economic trade, right? That's the reason why I would want you to keep you alive, because increasing the number of participants in the market increases the standard of living for everybody participating through comparative advantage and specialization in trade, right? But not only that, but we share components of our meta selves, right? You're human, I'm human, right?
Yeah.
The more we share, the more I care about you too, on top of the economic advantages of trade, right? So there's two aspects to why aggression is very expensive. Number one, we're related meta-self through the meta-self. We're both human. We're both you're American or Canadian?
Yeah, American.
Either way, we're both North American. We're American. We're American, right? So everything in commonality we share, right? And also, I go further to say that I will respect the better parts of you that are improvement with respect to me. right?
Mhm.
I actually want to improve. So there are different reasons, not only through trade. I don't want to make it seem like it's purely it's old-fashioned self-interest, right? It's meta self-interest. The fact that we share meta selves in some weighted respect
Mhm.
that will mathematically determine the correct amount of care I should have for any other meta self in the universe, whether it be a human or a rock, right?
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I guess I can understand where you're coming from. I just think that there may be one level of concern with morality, but I just think that the other concern is this kind of subjective experience, and like in some level, uh, like I just want to assert the value of being true to that subjective experience. And like, let's say if you have certain people that you love, like your family or your spouse or your kids or something like that, even if like on some like kind of grand uh, calculable evolutionary level, like it demands that you like sacrifice your kids for the greater good or something like that. I still want to say that like basically people's experience is like another factor that can't be rationalized. And like I think that
you're
like
saying it's a primary.
your obligations to like people that you love, for example, is like kind of transcends that. And I don't think that
I don't think
like
it
any kind
transcends
of
that.
like rationalism will like make it okay to like sacrifice your kid or something.
Yeah, the only like this is where I think the as a moral system, ego utilitarianism breaks down because at this point, like most people just don't care about the extremely distant future of their genes and their ideas, right?
Mhm.
People just don't care, and the only thing he has now, he's like an appeal to consequentialism, and he can just say, oh, you're gonna go extinct, you're gonna go extinct. But if people just don't care, which they don't, they care much more about their experience, then more or less the conversation is over. Like even if it's true that they're gonna go extinct, if people don't care, then like that's as far as you can take it.
Yeah.
The thing is, for any, so it seems like so this is what I talk about when I talk about sometimes the actor, the non-omniscient actor, conflates sub goals with primary objectives. And I think you're conflating feelings, which is a meter that nature gave us, with an actual objective here. You're trying to make it seem like it's some type of primary objective that shouldn't be violated.
Yeah.
And I disagree. Feelings are just a meter. They're the same thing. It's the same thing as pain and pleasure. It's just a more complex version of it. Any
Yeah, I
feelings?
mean, I agree that that's like why feelings exist, but at the same time, like we don't have to be, I guess, a slave to what evolution, like how evolution created us. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that like the feelings are what it's like to be human, right? So, like, I think that because we are human, then
Wait.
we have value, we place value on these feelings, whether it's
Why?
pleasure or happiness or whatever.
Why do feelings supersede rationality?
Because like ultimately, like reason is a slave to the passions, and like there's no reason why we need to do anything other than like ultimately the feelings that we want to create for our experience.
I think Adam would agree here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like
So
you cannot completely get rid of feelings because if you did, then you would do like what would be the
no,
motivation to pursue your meta self, right?
I
So at
disagree,
the very least, you need one feeling.
and I totally
But
disagree.
obviously, that's like an absurd scenario. Though. Like just like in the real world, like feelings exist, and they're the motivation for things. So yeah,
I think
it doesn't make sense as a moral system. Like people are just not like that. Like,
feelings
people
have
care.
become obsolete. Feelings are what causes
Okay,
some.
but they are obsolete for the furtherance of your meta self or whatever. But people don't care. People don't care, and if you want people to care, that's a feeling.
Oh, okay,
So
so
like,
let's put this to the test, okay? Just these feelings, okay? So I just watched the movie The Martian, right? Have you
Mhm.
guys familiar?
Yeah, I saw the ending of it. I walked
So
in on my friends watching it.
oh, so okay, so I can actually set it up. It doesn't matter that even if you know the ending. I don't think it matters. But the scenario was very intriguing to me. So a guy gets stranded on Mars based upon they thought he was dead after a mishap, right?
Hmm.
Now the thing is, they've already left Mars and they've already started other missions. I don't know where they were. They're somewhere else in the solar system. But then once he communicated that he's still alive, right? Now there's a moral choice, right? And if you were to use feelings, what would your feelings say to do as if you were NASA, let's say?
Hmm.
What would you do using these feelings?
I mean, if I was like, I mean, I think isn't that the inherent conflict of the movie? Because like, I mean, if I remember right, because NASA wanted to do the objectively rational thing and just come home, like forget this guy. But
ultimately, action is shows your real preference, and they didn't do that. So obviously, they didn't prefer the rational part.
Yeah, but weren't they basically, that was the conflict. There were
it was conflict,
right
but
here, because,
obviously,
But I don't see how this means anything though. Like if they were correct in your view, they were only correct by accident, right? Because it's not like they were ego-utilitarian.
what?
wait, so what ended up
they
happening?
didn't-
Ended up happening again?
I claim they were wrong. Okay, so
Oh yeah, okay. So how is
the,
this relevant?
the
then?
guy was stranded. He communicated to NASA that he was still alive. Now they spent, I half paid attention to the movie,
Mhm.
but they spent an inordinate amount of resources to construct a mission to get him back.
Right.
And they had to hide it at every step because, of course, the cost. They put like a department of JPL on it.
Hmm.
They rerouted missions to, and you probably know some of the cost of just to put a rocket in space.
Yeah. Yeah, so they spent all this money and resources, and they had to hide it from NASA, right? Because they were trying to hack the thing to go back and save the guy, right?
Yes. Now, now this is done. You wouldn't argue based on their feeling of obligation to the guy for their wrong call that they thought he was dead and leaving him there, right?
Yeah. But see, I think like, this represents our debate because I think that you're representing like NASA and their rationality in this sense. Like, just leave the guy behind. It's not worth going back there and the risk of everyone dying. But I think I represent the astronauts that were saying, hey, wait a second, we have this moral obligation. That guy's going to die if we don't go back and risk our lives to save him. And I would say like I want to stay true to that feeling of moral obligation because that's what makes you human. And that's the debate between rationality and humanism.
I think that's the part of the human you can get rid of, and it's actually a hindrance on your existence. Right? And I know it's
but again, right? Like this, all you have is this consequentialist appeal to like.
Well, that's the ultimate tiebreaker, isn't it? When you go extinct from keep doing this action, I think. And I won't even have to debate you guys anymore because you're extinct. I think I win by default here, right?
Or no, because like I think evolution programmed in these feelings for a reason, and I think that like this is what makes it worthwhile to be human is like these feelings that we experience, right?
That's not an argument.
People are just going to commit suicide.
That's okay. Yes. Wait, so I have arguments. So obviously, evolution malfunctions, right? It's every mutation isn't beneficial. Right. Very small.
No, but this doesn't like refute his point though. Like there are feelings there are feelings that are misapplied, or to the modern world. Like no one disagrees with that. Like the instinct to eat carbohydrates, it's like completely maladjusted to the modern world, right?
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you need a feeling to be motivated to like spread your genes.
Wait, how are you going to go on a diet? How are you going to go on a diet without reason rather than feelings? If it weren't for a reason, you'd
okay. But what's motivating you to lose weight though? Probably because you have a feeling to look good and stuff. Like it's undivorceable human motivation. With feelings.
But that all of that there's superior reasoning to that too. Also, for any valid feeling that's true to evolutionary advantages, there's a rational reason to it. There must be.
So like you can use
everyone you can point to. I can point to.
You're saying you can use reason to appease your feelings.
No, not everyone has perfect reason. Of course not. But nature forces you to this.
What you're saying though is that you can use reason to appease your feelings. You haven't gotten rid of feelings yet.
Wait, what? Okay, so that's fallacy there, right? Just because it hasn't gone extinct yet doesn't mean you need it, right? Things go. It's a process. If you analyze a process any time prior to completion, it's incomplete by definition. So it doesn't necessarily mean so let's say I'm observing a machine assemble iPhone. Halfway down the line, I look at it as half assembled. I said, okay, then I'm just going to say it's never be constructed. This is a fallacy here, right? Just because it's in existence doesn't mean it's useful. In other words.
Okay, but useful
No,
for
no,
what? Like, I mean, I just
So
don't think
And
that.
if it's useful, there are rational reasons. It's not a random thing. This has.
But see, you're confusing evolution with the process of how we came to be with who we are. And
Yeah,
like,
so
evolution
that's
took us to where we are, but we are not evolution.
I think you're the one who's trying to distinguish those two things. I see they're the same.
Yeah, and I'm saying you're trying to make them the same. They're not the same because we have a certain like existential freedom basically built into us. Evolution didn't like completely program us. We're not like
I don't think it's
automatons.
compatible with determinism.
And well, yeah, I mean, in terms of like the human experience, we experience freedom. Like regardless of whether in an objective sense we are free, I don't think we are, but we
make choices.
and that experience of freedom means that we can choose to do certain things, right? And like I don't think that evolution didn't hard program us into caring about certain things or maximizing certain objectives. I think that we have that freedom to define our objective.
I think it is hard programming. That's what determinism is, hard programming. Well, just because you can rewrite your code, but that this rewriting is part of the initial hard programming.
I think it's, I don't know,
okay,
I
so
think it's limiting property.
KK, let's say I'm a perfected human, right? And I have no feelings. Like,
Yes.
why should I wake up in the morning?
Because of reason. Because.
But why would I care? Why would I care for that goal if I cannot have
And
the
guess what?
feeling
Guess
of
what?
caring?
Then you're not perfect. Guess what? You go extinct. And
Okay, so part of perfection is
not
having the
perfect.
feeling of
That's
caring.
perfection. Perfection
Then.
is something. Perfection is a perpetual machine, a perpetuating machine of the meta self. If you claim that you don't have any motivation to perpetuate yourself, by definition you're contradicting yourself and you're not perfect. So your hypothetical disproves itself.
Motivation is a feeling. What kind of motivation is there that isn't a feeling?
So here's the problem: you're conflating reason with feelings, right? Raw. You're essentially almost arguing for just a slightly more complex version of hedonism.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that reasons can be a motive, or like reason can be a motivator. I mean, I think reason is a tool.
That's an assumption, right? Because again, I think you're emotionally attached to emotion itself.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I don't think that without any emotion, I don't think we would be. I mean, because motivation itself is an emotion.
That's a feeling, KK.
I think so. Now the burden of proof is on either of us to prove our side. Well, I don't think just from the claims itself, either of us have an advantage. But I can actually prove it. I can actually prove it. If feelings... No, you don't need feelings other than sensory perception, right? You don't need a little higher level of emotional, of non-conscious reasoning, right?
But if we didn't need feelings, why did evolution program them into us?
They're temporary, right? Things can be an intermediate evolution until something better comes along, right? Just because we needed a horse and buggy doesn't mean it was the perfect form, right?
Okay, but what if evolution, like in the service of this goal of like maximizing our genetic propensity or whatever, or reproduction, it gave us evolution as a tool. What if that emotion is now something that becomes its own thing, and we decide to value that thing apart from the reason why evolution programmed it into us?
Now, so evolution, you would agree evolution would reward any feeling that's consistent with the reason behind it, right? And once over time they start to converge, you will start to conflate. Right? The more they overlap, the harder it is to differentiate. And that's what I claim you're doing here. Now, you're confusing, just since we're so advanced in time, whatever, relative to whatever the past, right? It's converged to a point where it's very hard to distinguish between good and bad emotion, because so many of our emotions are now turned useful because they match reason. For every valid emotion, there's going to be reasoning behind it, but not vice versa, right? But there exists emotion that is irrational. Obviously,
Yeah.
No, you see,
You would agree communism is an economic morality based on feelings, right?
I mean,
no,
I
but
would say that
you can only say a feeling is irrational if you have an ultimate goal, which is arbitrary, and the only justification for this ultimate goal of yours is an appeal to consequentialism, right? So in any other framework,
It's the other way around. Consequentialism is what gave us the business.
no, whatever, but like in any other framework, it doesn't make
No,
sense
it's
to
not
say
whatever. The
the only
causality.
valid questions, the only valid emotions are the
Flip
ones
the
which converge with
causality.
reality.
I don't think it's trivial that you flip the causality.
I misspoke though, like you know what I mean.
Say what you mean again? I was too focused on criticizing.
Okay, so you say like the only valid emotions are the ones that
There's
allow.
no valid emotions.
Oh, okay, so you're changing it now.
Wait, but if I understand you correctly, you're saying that like basically evolution programs in these emotions to achieve a certain goal, right? But it's only like instrumental, and you can if there's some way you could just eradicate that emotion and just have it go towards the goal, then like we should do that, or like evolution would rather us have us do that instead, right?
Yes,
Like, use
if
this imperfect emotion,
there's a more efficient way
which
to accomplish the goal.
right. So like you're saying that emotions are like kind of a trap, and that they lead us astray in terms of like making us irrational and so forth. They're an imperfect tool, in other words.
It's a different part of a brain for that very reason.
Yeah.
No, but he makes a stronger claim though that we don't need any emotion.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think that's true because like I said, like we wouldn't have any motivation if we didn't have emotion. So it's like it's an imperfect tool, but it's a necessary tool.
You would also not have any. Okay, so you're only looking at, and I disagree with even the benefits. You're only looking at the benefits. What about the costs? You will not do anything. Emotion is what causes you to be irrational a lot of the time. Most, if not all of the time, it causes you to do stupid mistakes.
Yeah, but if you do the wrong, I mean, it leads you astray, but at the same time, it's the reason for you to do anything in the first place.
And I disagree with that. That's just a claim that neither of us. Even it's so abstract. It's hard to on the spot construct.
I mean, if it's 50-50, then you're incorrect in saying it's not true, right?
No, I win by default again, 1-to-1, right?
Again, you appeal to consequentialism or whatever.
No. It must be since this is determinism. Determinism is a synonym for the mechanical universe, right? That means mechanisms, causality, and cause and effect are reasons. Therefore, for every valid emotion, for every useful emotion, but I think for every even this, this is purely new. Right? For every valid emotion you think is perfect, I can construct a hypothetical where it becomes obsolete because it's too rigid, right? It's too rigid.
But you're taking the perspective of evolution itself. You're basically like taking yourself out of yourself and putting yourself into this realm of like this outside human experience. I'm saying that we're humans. This is our experience. Like let's like be true to that experience.
You see what's wrong there? You're creating bias when you want to do analysis. When you want to analyze if if an act of murder was wrong, do you put yourself in the shoes of the murderer? Actually, I know I propose you should do this one, but you know what I'm saying, right?
I mean, I think when we think of murder as wrong, we're coming at it from an inner perspective of the feeling that it's wrong, of like something is like wrong about like killing this person and taking away their life. I think that's something that's very has a lot to do with our experience and how we experience that situation. If we take ourselves out of that like a robot, then I don't think that you would see anything wrong with that. Like I think that like a robot viewing the act of someone killing another person would be like, whatever, doesn't matter.
This is why I don't like science fiction on TV. So I don't like Ex Machina, Spock. It gets like everybody against the perfect rational being, which is the perfect is I claim the perfect meta self. The only perfectly valid emotion that I think can exist is the emotion that values reason.
Yeah.
And that's like self-perpetuating. That's like self-destructive. It's weird, right? If there's I don't think it can exist. It's contradictory, right? If you have an emotion that purely respects reason, then it'll want to commit suicide. And oh yeah, back to suicide.
Is that you though? Like that you have? That sounds like you.
Well, I'm gonna. No, are you saying to kill yourself?
No, no. But like, it sounds like the kind of person that would have this emotion would argue for the things you are arguing.
I do want to kill that part of myself, right? I do want to kill. I do. No, I don't want to kill my meta self, the totem. I want to kill that proportion of my meta self that's emotion. That's what I want to improve myself by getting rid of. For God's sake, I wouldn't want to eat unhealthy food ever. Just imagine the diet. Just imagine the diet alone, right? Just look at it from. Let's just look at diet. It's a cool thing, right? What would you eat? Using just pure reasons is not pleasure. What would you eat? And your only objective is to perpetuate your meta self, not your physical body. But the physical body is a tool for the meta self.
I just think the extent to which your philosophy is valid or would be whatever emotion people feel. I mean, I'm sure you feel some kind of emotion towards this idea or this ideal that you've constructed.
I'm human. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah, and I think that is the appeal of your philosophy. I mean, if anyone is going to be won over by it, it's based on the whatever emotion that engenders of this idea of transcending yourself into something beyond human.
Not transcending yourself. You're always transcending yourself in a way if you're improving. If improvement isn't transcending, right? If you define if transcending is a subset of if improving is a subset of transcending, then I don't understand your case then.
Yeah, I mean, well, what about immanence though? Immanence is like the opposite of transcendence. I would say that like both
you mean
things
perfection or immediate occurrence? What do you mean? Immanence or immanence?
Immanence is like something to do with like inner experience or something like that. Interiority, yeah, I guess you could say. And I guess I want to like assert the value of that in addition to transcendence. Like I think that both things are part of the human experience.
I think your perspective is a total inferior way of looking at morality. Again,
it's only inferior. So for one thing,
you know what I say? It's inferior if evolution says it's inferior, not me.
Yeah, no, but like when you say morality though, like you're the only person who thinks of morality as what action to take to perpetrate my instance.
I don't understand the point there. Are you making an implication there?
No. I'm just saying that this is like a trouble with you and communicating. Like this is not morality for most people.
Again, I don't care what subjective morality is. I care about relative morality.
No, but I'm not even saying like the content of other people's morality is different. I'm saying the thing that they consider morality, like the questions that most people think of as moral questions.
I don't care their strategy.
Because you're using the word and it's gonna confuse like two watchers.
3, faggot. Yeah, probably 2, not including me, but well, 2 now. wait, what was your point? What was your point again, Adam? No, as far as communication, like I'm really like.
Oh yeah, you said.
I don't care about the immediate confusion of immediate viewers.
No, but like what I was gonna say though is that his approach is only inferior if we assume your approach is correct, right?
He's assuming the primary objective of the human experience itself is somewhat always valid just because it's subjective.
No, see, but that's a difference in how people view morality and you view morality, right? For most people, there doesn't have to be an ultimate, like a primary objective.
We agree on some level that morality is the correct action to take of an actor, right? The problem is...
I mean,
but correct in what sense, though? Correct meaning prescriptively correct, or correct as in it furthers their goal? Like we talked about this right at the beginning. That
isn't that again? Odds are a subset of is. I don't get. They're the same thing. Normative is a subset.
The domain of morality, like this conditional imperative that doesn't.
Yeah, that's what we talked about right at the beginning.
It's not just a means to a goal. I think whatever that is like is rooted in these feelings that we have of like the subjective experience of like this murder is wrong no matter what. I don't care what the murderer was trying to achieve. It's still wrong. And I think that that's like where morality comes from. And I think that was something that evolution put into us. But like, and whatever reason it was trying to do, like maximize the species or whatever, like that's beside the point, because we have that experience of like we experience this as that's wrong, and like that's something that's just a bare fact that we have to deal with, and like I don't think that.
No,
I think that trying to transcend that and become anti or like
I think
superhuman or whatever would like basically ignore that basic fact, the brute fact that makes that thing wrong.
I have a very big contention with this intuition you refer to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for instance, what is the claim that all murder is wrong? Right?
That's a very strong claim.
What about this, right? What about this guy has a very contagious disease, right?
Mm.
That's likely to kill you and your just you and your family.
Yeah.
And you have a knife in your hand, he doesn't.
Yeah.
And he's tied down for some reason. And if you don't kill him now, it's gonna spread airborne, right? And you have a chance to do it before it does.
Yeah, but the thing is, you may do it. You may have reasons to do it, but if you're human, you would still feel bad about it, because you would still feel on some level wrong. Even though you end up doing it, you still feel that it's wrong.
Your actions ultimately really show your preferences.
See, but this is another claim, though. Like, I'm not sure this is correct.
To say you had reservations after the fact that you slit his throat and spit in his neck doesn't make any sense, right? It's obvious the net instinct was to kill the guy.
No, but see, that's the point where we become not human. If we don't experience that feeling of like, even though I recognize that I have to do this thing, this horrible thing, if I don't recognize it as still horrible, then that's not human.
I don't think it's horrible.
I think it's still horrible.
And a rational person would agree, right? By putting themselves in your shoes, they'd say, oh, this is perfectly rational, and just reason alone.
I think that's the danger. Like when that's kind of what leads to like fascism and stuff like that, because it in the service of some greater goal, it dehumanizes people.
Okay.
And it reduces them to basically like a variable and a function instead of.
I don't know. That sounds like
what's wrong with that? You agree with determinism, right? We're all just part of a program. We're all programs ourselves. That's
not the experience, though, and that's why it comes down to like the objective view of the world versus the subjective.
I think I'm arguing with emotion here, not reason. I think I'm really arguing with emotion here.
Yeah, and I think that emotion is a valid way to argue.
Oh, that's even worse. I mean, it's like. Okay.
At the end of the day, what are we talking about? Like, we're talking about the ideal.
Can you present me a hypothetical? Experience. Can you present me a hypothetical where emotion is better than, let's say, versus an omniscient being?
Mm-hmm.
Can you present me a hypothetical where emotion's better?
Why am I up against the omniscient being?
Because you can construct a very retarded person, right, and use his ability to reason, and obviously his ability to choose the correct one. I'm talking about pure reason, right? You would want to achieve. This is your end goal, right? It's almost a dead end to do it through emotion, or at least inefficient to do it through emotion, because emotion is hard programming at least for a time, until you can see that it's wrong until you get statistics to see that it's wrong. It's hard to overwrite. It's hard to rewrite. It takes time. You know how long it takes for you to rewrite code.
Yeah.
Especially if it was temporarily advantageous for a while. It's going to take hundreds of years for us to get rid of our feelings for carbohydrates if eating this much carbohydrates is bad for us at this point.
It's not happening, by the way.
No, but we might introduce technology that we don't have to. But that's beside the point. I mean, emotion is always an inefficient alternative to pure reason. Oh, I don't even understand how you guys can even. It's emotional to even. I think you guys need to think about this before we go any further. I think we need to drop this, because this is becoming irrational at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know how a debate can progress irrationally.
I don't think that like it's necessarily about being irrational. I think it's about a synthesis between the two things. Isn't that a synthesis between emotion and reason? And not like it's the dominance of one term or the other.
You would at least concede me this. When you have the alternative pure perfect reason, it's always better than any other alternative with any other percentage of emotion. You'd at least give me that, right?
I don't think that reason is enough for a good human experience. Like I don't like. Sure, I like solving math problems, but like that's not what I would want to spend my whole day doing. And I'm sure like I don't think that like that. I think there's more to the human experience, and that's where like art comes in as well. And art demonstrates the value of emotion and feeling, and how that's how we like relate to things. And
Is
it's more
anime
than
art?
math. And like of course math is valid too, but it's like you can't just have the dominance of one thing or the other. They both have their domain, and I think that like a productive approach is to synthesize the two things.
You know what the domain for reason is? The universe.
Do I know the what?
You know what the domain for a reason?
Domain?
Yeah, the domain for reason is? It's
Yeah.
the universe.
But we are not the universe. We're humans. So.
And
And feelings are more really present to us than.
Now let me define anything that exists, any parallel universes, multiverses, as part of the universe. I arbitrarily define it as such. Right? Now dualism disappears, right? It's very arbitrary, this dualism.
Mm.
To call a plane of existence outside of reality is just arbitrary. I can easily define it inside of reality. There's no advent. It's actually an emotional disadvantage doing so, separating the two, because it starts to feed on emotion, since it's emotionally based in the first place. I think that might be the distinguishing line. I think dualism might be the distinguishing line between pure logic and any emotion.
But I think whether you like it or not, you're still experiencing things subjectively, and like you still.
Am I imperfect? Yes. If that's another way of putting what you just said. Am I imperfect? Yeah, sure.
There's no way that you can step outside of yourself. As much as you try, you're still going to be inside of yourself.
You mean, am I ever going to be a perfect reasoning being? Is that another way to put that phrase?
I mean, you'd have to stop. Like, you'd have to not be conscious. You'd have to like basically transcend consciousness, where you're not experiencing.
You're saying I can't turn off my emotions.
You'd have to turn off your mind completely. You'd have to just be a pure functioning computer without any kind of like experience of what's going on.
I'd have to at least turn off the emotional part of my brain, right?
Yeah, but as you said yourself, your perspectives, your perceptions themselves are feelings. So, but that it would be an imperfection also. Like it would be more perfect.
Now perception I can further partition into two categories: emotion and reason. Okay, so the human perception, yes, is made up of those two things. Now, I claim you can totally get rid of one of them. Obviously, you know which one: emotion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So okay, make your argument again. I'm not saying get rid of perception, I'm saying get rid of the part of perception you don't need.
Yeah, and the part of perception you don't need, it seems like, from your perspective, is that just get rid of the experience itself. If you were just like a functional brain that could just like compute things and then like operate according to the goals of evolution or whatever without any experience at all, would that not be ideal?
What do you mean by experience?
In other words, if you were just like what they call a philosophical zombie, where basically someone is just someone walking around and doing stuff, but they're not actually like experiencing anything. They're not like seeing things. They're not really feeling anything. They're just acting in the world, and
like
they
crying?
have no interiority.
No, I think you can make an even stronger claim than that. Like assuming his thing, like you can construct a machine that's conscious, and it's smarter than humans.
Uh-huh.
So like the perfect sort of being is not human. So like eventually you're saying we're gonna converge to a machine.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Yeah.
He
No.
sees
No.
He sees that, and he agrees.
But they're not. But the thing is, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I want to get rid of the parts of the human that are imperfect. Yes. So if you rigorously define human as exactly what we are now, which includes emotion, sure, I want to change. I want to deviate from that rigorous definition of human, right? Just take out the emotion from human, whatever you want to call that, whether it be a philosophical zombie. I'm willing to accept that. You can put whatever emotional term you want to put on that and deride it as much as you want, but it's still an advantage over your alternative.
Okay, I will say though that like, I mean, basically you're free existentially to define any goal that you want. If you want to identify your goal with this idea of transcending the human, transcending all irrational emotions, and like or whatever. I feel like that's an existential choice that you make. I don't think that other people are going to make that choice. And
Yeah, I agree.
And guess what? Guess what? There's the
They're
ultimate.
gonna go extinct. Yeah.
Yes. So why why do you say it like it seems trivial,
It doesn't
but
like
it's powerful.
it's very unconvincing, dude. Like literally, no one
What do you
cares.
mean? Like, what do I care if you're convinced or not? Do it then. Do it then. If you think walking off a cliff is in your best interest, do it then, right? This is so. I claim that nature punishes you proportionally to the proportion of the magnitude of your mistake, of your deviation from
yeah, but
the
I'm
truth.
still here, right? I'm not
Exactly.
dead. Yet.
So
I don't adopt your
obviously the mistake
philosophy.
wasn't that grave, right? But over time it accumulates, right? So given the fact that it is a small mistake, valuing emotion so highly, it is valuing religion even, right?
Mm.
It doesn't say just because it's still in existence doesn't mean it's not going to be extinct in the future. Again, you're analyzing a process before it's completed. It's
But
not
at the end of the day, there's, I mean, whatever philosophy you adopt, it's like that results in a certain experience. So like at the end of the day, will people want to experience life in the way that in the way you've constructed it, or would they want to experience life in maybe a way that's more influenced by art and feeling and emotion?
Again,
And I think a lot of people would probably choose emotion and art and feeling.
guess what? You know where I'm going though. I know, Adam. You know, I don't understand why you're not applying my analysis. You know my response to all these hypotheticals.
Let's
I
go
mean,
extinct.
Sure.
There's more to life than
Okay. What happens
there's
when you
prima
choose
facie.
what
There's more
happens
to
when you
life than
choose an
perpetuating
inferior
yourself.
alternative? What happens over time? The law of large numbers. What happens? Deterministically, mechanically, what's going to happen?
Like, yeah.
Even if it takes a long time, given if it's a small mistake, right? So over time, eventually you're going to go extinct. Now who am I debating? Who wins the debate by default?
Yeah.
No,
Well,
how is
I
that
mean,
winning?
but you could argue that, like, I mean, like nuclear weapons and all that stuff. This was like a consequence of this scientific rationality of like, like
byproduct.
game theory and like, if I do this, then they'll do that. But if they do this, then I'll do that. And like, and on some level, that could end up in the result of the destruction of the human race is not being true enough to our feelings and our experiences.
Okay, so do you think murders are game theorists rather than emotional crazy people? Which is
Yeah. I mean, I think that like individual violence is more of a matter of rationality, but I think that the systematic violence is more of a danger of over rationalization, like state
Can I ask
violence.
a really quick question? I
Yeah.
think this might have a relation. Like, if you're not a foundationalist, what are you?
I mean, I'm just like a non-systematic thinker, I guess. I just basically.
what would happen if
I try
science?
to like articulate everything into a coherent whole, but still, I mean, I try to be. It's more of like basically, I try to be mostly coherent and like open, to some sense, to like changing of my axioms or changing of my perspectives. But it's not like
No,
something
if
that's
you have
necessarily
axioms, you're a foundationalist.
I mean, I think I do have axioms, like I guess working axioms, I would say, more than like, I mean, because at the end of the day, I view it as more of like, my axioms is more of just like a scientific hypothesis or something that it could be, it works for now, but it could be discarded in the future if it doesn't fit with things.
So it's just a matter of the degree of proof that you demand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is a different conversation, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot what I was gonna say.
There's something about nuclear weapons and rationality.
Yeah.
No, oh yeah. So the whole claim that I think it's not actually reasons when you have the systematic violence. This is actually systematic emotion. It's not systematic reasoning.
Yeah. I guess
This is what happens when you conflate emotion with logic. You get these systemic huge mistakes. This is how you get. So what do you think, Adam? Do you think communism is more an emotional plea or a rational economic plea?
Well, I think
Just
it's
analyze
influenced
extreme.
by it's informed by innate emotions, right? And it's informed by intentions more than consequences. So I mean, if you want to say,
Emotion then, right? If you're consequentialist, you're necessarily a rationalist, you're necessarily an egotist. No. But you see, they start to converge, right? Emotion and what were you saying again? Shit, I forgot. I'm fried at this point. I think we waited a little too long for today. But
Emotion and reason. I was trying to synthesize those two things.
yeah, I think you're conflating. These huge mistakes aren't reasons. I mean, for even if you could point to a case where you have a big fuck up based on reasoning, faulty reasoning, there are, for every one of those you point out, there are 1,000 emotional ones, and as you go further along, there are less and less of them. Right? Logic becomes better. Logic progresses. I mean, the ability to pursue perfect logic progresses over time, and this you can't deny. And every time it does, it's emotions just like God. It's getting put in a dark corner where it belongs, right in the dark corner of your anus, Adam. No, but seriously, I don't understand. I don't.
I think like when it comes to like nuclear war and stuff, I mean, just look at like all the math that was designed to develop those theories and all that stuff, and like these people were just thinking in terms of rationality, and like humanists are asserting the value of like the emotion of like, this is insane. Why are we pointing all these nuclear weapons toward each other?
So you make like the postmodernist case, like rationality got us into like trouble apparently, and therefore rationality is wrong. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that like rationality is bad. I'm saying that it has to develop in concert with emotions, and like.
But I mean, it seems to me like the game theory stuff that was developed with the emotion of not wanting America to get nuked, right?
Yeah,
like it's paradoxical or whatever, but it's not completely divorced of human emotion and compassion. It just happens to be that neither of the outcomes is like the optimal compassionate outcome. And we're still going for the most compassionate one, right? And the one which minimizes sort of like nuclear casualties or whatever.
No, here's a perspective too that I've made a case on another talk show I participated in, and I got some adverse reactions, right? What if? So obviously we've used nuclear technology to kill people, right? In Japan, right? Now, what's to say that actually didn't minimize the deaths that would have occurred if we didn't do that? Like, if we didn't do that, conventional war might.
Yeah, so maybe it did. I don't know.
No, well, with the specific case of Japan, it's tricky because they surrendered before we nuked them. Their only condition was that. No, I know. Yeah, we can get rid of this for the hypothetical. But like,
no, not get rid of it. No, let's assume that. Okay.
Oh no, but if we assume that, then it's obviously more casualties because of the nuclear.
No. Here's another perspective you haven't considered.
No, but they literally surrendered.
The unseen, dickhead. It's the unseen, right? What about the deterrence it would cause right after that? The fact that you showed the human destruction, right? When you blow up a house, when you see these footage films of houses getting obliterated, it doesn't show the effect rather than when you show those numbers. How many wars, have we had a world war since we detonated a nuclear bomb? Tell me that. Huh, Adam? Did you consider that? Am I considering? No, right? What? Now, in that respect, could it have been minimized? Did they actually minimize the number of deaths?
Well, we don't really know. I mean,
I know, but we don't know.
We still have like 6,000 nukes pointing at each other. Like, the whole thing could end at any time, as far as we know.
No, but that's good.
Until now,
it's very paradoxical, right? It's like it's true. Like, nukes are deterrents.
Yeah.
I mean, unknowingly, it's deterrents to other nukes, but you kind of need nukes to stop nukes.
But it's also concepts exist by default, right? Eventually, we're going to discover every concept, as long as we don't get some intelligent species is going to discover almost, if not all, concepts. You have to go through this.
What if though, like, I mean, humans just obliterate themselves before any of that happens because we just have all this. And it starts over again. Right?
It starts over again until it gets it right. Whatever. But the thing is, we haven't, right? I mean, the further we go along, you know, now that we suffered a Cold War, these are growing pains. These are necessary growing pains when you discover nuclear technology.
Mm.
It's only natural that this occurs. Probably, if you had the data to analyze any intelligent existence over its lifetime that experienced nuclear technology, they probably went through a similar thing. This might be a necessary stepping stone toward evolving.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with that, but I just think that, I mean, maybe it's not completely rationality's fault or whatever that we're in this situation. Maybe it is some kind of combination between reason and emotion, but maybe it's just the wrong combination of reason and emotion.
Yeah, anything's wrong other than zero.
Yeah.
Well, again, okay, I can make one. I can make one. I can introduce a mitigating factor. Imperfect reasoning. Obviously, we get smarter. We should theoretically get smarter as we go. It should be just at least a random walk with a bias toward increasing intelligence over time. So, sure. I mean, I forgot my point already. I'm fried at this point. I actually got more into philosophy than I wanted to. I wanted to get more definition to set up. So maybe we should try to wrap it up and let's see what things we can agree upon for tomorrow.
Okay.
And so let's assume that I've won this debate, right?
Okay, I'll grant
Logic
you that.
wins, right? just joking. So for tomorrow's debate, I think determinism, an objective reality exists, right?
Yeah.
It's deterministic, meaning it's mechanical. That we can construct hypotheticals, and they're necessarily, if it's well defined, has a conclusion. Now we're going to discuss. I wanted to actually establish my relative theory of value, right? Did you kind of adopt my definition for subjective? Created totally by the intelligence of a mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has something to do with that. I still think that that's coming at it from an objective standpoint. I think that
I don't know how you're using objective in that.
I guess from a outside, stepping outside your mind, basically.
Yeah, see, that's an alternative use of objective.
Yeah.
Now, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to exclusively use my definition set for that. As far as if you want to refer to that, just say like third-party perspective or something, but try not to, because you're gonna. When I hear objective, I think of like a lot of different things, like goal, emotionless, which is kind of like what you just referred to.
Yeah, I guess I can use basically inner experience versus outer perspective, or inner perspective versus outer perspective.
Yeah, but the thing is, all inner experiences are outer experiences for other people. So your inner experiences are my outer experiences. So that's a problem there. So when you do it, when you accept my definition set, it makes clear of everything. Now it shows that anything you think of, any opinion you construct, any definition set you choose is subjective, arbitrary, created by your mind, right? Even though it might have been caused by non-subjective things.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that those concepts themselves only have meaning when you look at our inner perspective, because a concept without considering that inner perspective is just a pattern of neurons, and we don't have any way of distinguishing that from any other pattern of neurons.
I didn't get that. Did you get that?
Yeah, okay, so concepts only exist if they're experienced, basically.
No, Ken.
So you can have them as definitions,
but
like if there's no one there, yes. But like if you don't experience them, that's like
now an experience of them.
I don't know.
An experience of a concept is a different. Being aware or even aware of a definition is a different thing than the concept itself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe there would almost be three realms, I guess you could say, of the objective, or I know I can't say objective, but whatever the outside is, and then there's the inner of what it's like to be that thing, and then there's
mind
also,
product. Just call it a subjective as a mind product.
Yeah, I guess so. And then there's also a third realm of these concepts or whatever that exist before anyone, like even if there were no one to think, no humans to exist to ever think of math, in some sense, those principles would still be there, I guess. I don't know. To be
Yeah.
discovered by someone like that could potentially be discovered.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you want to partition the universe into
Yeah.
three
Yeah, so
realms,
maybe I'm a triest. I don't know.
but they're not necessarily their own universe. I mean, it's arbitrary to say so. It's
Yeah.
arbitrary to say so. Um, I don't have any problem with that. So yeah, of course. That's why my definition set is still in accordance with that. It doesn't have any problem with that. It's just the terms applied to those realms. So in one realm is concepts. The other realm. So it's term. Now I apply terms to what you just defined.
Mm.
The realm of the mind. Any mind product is subjective. Anything other than those two realms. Oh shit. There's some so non-subjective would actually include concepts.
Yeah.
So I want to partition reality into two realms.
Okay.
A dualist thing. So I think you can further subdivide the non-subjective into concepts and the
Objects.
physical, maybe you could
Yeah,
say,
physical
something like
objects.
that. Physical non-subjective objects.
Hmm.
So anything physical that's not created by the mind is here. Anything created by physical and created by anything non-physical and not created by the mind is here.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
a
that would
cool?
roughly correspond to how I think of things as
Yeah.
well. Like just
Yeah.
the physical objects, and then there's experience, which is subjective, which is created by the mind, but it's also
Yeah.
experienced by the mind.
It's somewhat processed.
Yeah,
process
and then there's some kind of like Platonic realm of ideas or forms
Yes,
or something,
yeah.
which I don't know in what sense that exists, but I think in some sense it does exist.
No, I mean, like for him, concepts are permutations of elements, if you will. So by
Sure.
definition, they all exist.
By concepts are all they're all formed by simpler concepts. The problem is their fundamental base concept. Yeah, there has to be spanning set. You can arbitrarily choose a spanning set probably. But anyways, I think let's agree to that. This partition of the universe. Let's call it the universe, right?
Yeah.
So the universe has mind products. It has non-physical mind products, and it has non-physical non-mind products.
Yeah.
So we
Wouldn't
have
there be
realm
four
of
things if there's like physical and mind product? It seems like there would be four things, but so
Well,
physical and mind produced, and then non-physical.
We'll use my terms though. So subjective refers to mind products. Non-subjective. Shit. Because I group together concepts in non-subjective because they're not created by the mind. Right? Technically,
I mean, like whenever you invoke a concept like this, just specify what you mean. And just
this I think mine's the cleanest. It's the most mathematical, right? So you have mind products, non-mind products, and then you partition non-mind products, non-objective, into concepts and physical non-subjective mind product, physical non-subjective reality. And this part you might want to call objective. But that part of non-subjective. No, that part is shit.
So
I have to write down to see.
So basically, you have like mind produced is like subjective, right? And then non-mind produced, that's another category. And then you're dividing.
But concepts are part of that. Concepts are part of that.
Okay, concepts are part of the non-mind produced. But then I feel like there would be a fourth thing that's like subjective, that's also like conceptual or something.
So it's a subset of subjective?
Maybe, or maybe that's like our experience of the conceptual.
Yes, your opinion of concepts.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how an opinion of a concept. A concept is I'm not sure you can have an opinion of a concept. I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, like maybe if you what if you understood a mathematical concept wrong, or what if you got a proof wrong or something like that?
You're referring to a different concept, but you're giving it the same name. You're giving it the same term. So what you're calling math is not actually the concept of the concept of math, which is arbitrary. So you agree that terms are arbitrary, but concepts are not, right? So once you change a portion of the concept, it's no longer that concept.
Yeah.
Even if you take away, add to, or change, whatever, you augment in some way a concept. It is not the same concept, not at all. It's not. They're not the same sets. It's the same thing as set theory. Concepts are the same thing as they have the same structure as sets. They're the same. They're equivalent, right? So you can use set theory to do the mathematics for concepts and metaselves. So I call concepts metaselves, and this is what I claim the actors. I think we're getting a better sense of what I'm talking about now. Now that we partition reality into these 2 or 3.
Yeah, or 4, something like that.
No, the 2 main ones are subjective, the mind, and non-subjective. That's the 2 main part. That's the 2 main.
Yeah.
That's the main partition. Then we further subcategorize non-subjective into the realm of concepts and physical non-subjective reality, not
Okay.
concepts, but reality, instances.
All right, I guess I can agree with that tentatively. I guess I'm becoming a little bit exhausted. So
Yeah, me
maybe we
too.
need
Me
to-
too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good ground to stop off. But you see, I'm a reasonable guy, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate Mike for participating. He's a really good sport, and Adam, you're okay too. But watch Mike's channel, Mike Hugman, on YouTube. He brings up some very good perspectives, and I appreciated his input. Hopefully, he can help me develop my philosophy, and maybe he'll become a convert one day.
Yeah, it was a good meeting, guys.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Later, Adam. Faggot.